Yeah, I still forgot one thing that I wanted to tell that I didn't get to before lunch as well. So one of the most unexpected and frightening questions I got when we did this during the pandemic, when a journalist asked me, what do you do when the government actually follows your simulation advice? And then what happens if your predictions are incorrect? And I thought, I never thought about that. My goodness. So suddenly, we are not academics just making a toy thing to publish in a paper, but there's real life, real people. And so we started to think that's why we also did this kind of explanations. So we were suddenly very aware that if we claim to be very good in our simulation, if we never claimed that we can predict very precise, but we could very well predict the trends. So when things would go up and what would happen when restrictions, how much time it more or less would take to have effect and things like that. So we never went for precise numbers, but always for the trends. And then we try to also see what should we do so that we can give guarantees that what we predict, what we show them, actually will come about. And then you get back to, we can show all this explanation, all the steps that we show to back up our story. We need to make the story complete. And if we can do that, then we might not give a 100% guarantee, but we can have enough confidence to show that something will work or not. So that's something that, I'm also a computer scientist. We never think about those kind of things. But when you do things in the real world, suddenly that becomes very important. So you need to think about, what do I do? How can I guarantee, how can my system guarantee that when people pick things up, that it actually is not going wrong? Okay, so for this session, I thought I would do this one. In the last kind of year, I think, we started working with people in the north of Scandinavia. It's the Sami people. Sami people are the only indigenous people in Europe. They've been in the north of Scandinavia for at least 8,000 years, but they don't know exactly when they arrived there because there are no records of that, but at least there are some findings from 8,000 years old that prove that they were there. So they were there long before there was Sweden or Norway or Finland or anything like that. So like a lot of other indigenous people, you have them as well in Australia. I've also contacts there with Aboriginals, in New Zealand, Maori, in Canada, the Inuit, and there are more people around the world. Those people are very often most affected by a lot of the big challenges in the world. Climate change, industrialization, and also they can be affected by the AI. And like many places, and I heard that here as well, people have the feeling that the current AI, which now is reachable by everyone, so everyone can suddenly get the feeling that they have it at their fingertips. People start thinking, we should use AI as it is the AI that is propagated by the big tech, because it's very convenient and look all the wonderful things that can be done with it. So this story is a little bit about, there are wonderful things we can do, but there are also a lot of things that we have to be very careful about doing. So this is not a presentation about AI for indigenous people. it's AI with indigenous people. So if we want to do the good things in the world, then we have to do the things with the people and not for the people. And that means that we have to respect people for what they are and not for what we think they should be. So not everyone has to be the same, and not all of us have to do the same kind of things. It doesn't mean that therefore people are not allowed to use technology, or you should never be allowed to use LLMs when you're indigenous or whatever. It's more like we should also see what's very dear to us, and that's not only for indigenous people, it's actually for all people in all societies, but it's more clear for indigenous people. So what happens in the north of Scandinavia? There's a lot of climate change there, which means that there is snow still. Still have a lot of snow and ice, but the temperatures, they are higher than they used to be, which means that there is snow, and then starts thawing, there's temperatures above zero, things melt, the top of the snow melts, then it starts going below zero, freezes, you get ice. And then it snows again, and then it thaws again, melts again. So you get layers of ice in between the snow, because it's not cold enough the whole time. So this has a huge impact on the reindeer. So the Sami people traditionally are herders, they're semi-nomadic, so they herd their reindeer between summer and winter pastures, and in the winter they can survive, the reindeer, by going through the snow and getting some food off the ground. But when there's ice in between the snow, they can't get through the ice. So they have very big trouble now to find food. So climate change is a real practical problem for those people, and they need to find other places where they can go. But then they used to have a lot of space, and so there's still relatively a lot of space in Scandinavia. But a lot of that space nowadays is taken up by railways, by roads, by mines, by big industry, which they call green industry, because there's a lot of water around, water power in that area. So you can actually use that energy for industry that otherwise needs a lot of coal and gas and those kind of things. So they call it green industry, but that's all new. So a lot of the space that there used to be is now taken by other parties. So what normally they would do if things get bad, they try to find other places where it's better. But now they're restricted, because what they would do, it's not possible anymore. So they get more and more squeezed into a narrow area where the things climate-wise get worse as well. And the question is, what can we do with AI to do something that people can use? So that's kind of the point where we are. And this is exactly why I say you should do AI with indigenous people and not for indigenous people, because we also have to learn a lot from them to see how do they live, what's important. So one of the things that come up, and actually already happened in Finland a lot, is reindeer herders in winter, when they have trouble for the reindeer to find food, they can feed the reindeer. They actually get subsidies to feed the reindeer. And then, yeah, fine. So we can carry the reindeer over the winter, and then we have a viable herd. But I didn't know, but I learned that actually within 3 or 4 years, when the reindeer get fat in the winter, they don't know anymore how to find food if they don't get fed. So that quick. So they're very good learners. So the way that the reindeer live changes within a couple of years. And actually, that's something which is really against all the morals of the reindeer herders. So those communities think you shouldn't change nature. That's how they live for centuries already. The way and their meaning of life is with the reindeer, doing the routes in summer and winter, going back and forth, living with the animals, not having the animals, not capturing the animals, but living with them. So feeding the reindeer actually is not something that they think they should do. It's not that they cannot do it, but they will only do that when there's really nothing else left and they really feel that they lose their life. Similar is mining industry is very strong in the north. They have rare metals and all that, so that's very strategic nowadays. So then the idea is that the mining industry gets preference over reindeer herders because the mining actually gives a lot of economic value. And reindeer, yeah, they're fun. They draw tourists, they go there, they look at the reindeer, oh, so nice, culture, blah, blah. But for the rest, they don't generate a lot of money for other people. So mining gets first, and then they say, yeah, whenever you make a mine, you occupy some part of the land, you have to compensate the reindeer herders. So they say, well, we just buy out a reindeer herder that lived in that area, and then we just buy all those reindeer. And that makes sense from a Western perspective. But they explained to me, so that's like you're married, and then someone comes and says, no, I want to live in your house. You don't have enough space anymore, but I'll just buy your wife out. And then you have enough space again. I mean, we could not imagine doing that. But that's how it feels for them when you say, we will buy your reindeer, and then you have less reindeer, and you're okay, because you have the money. So we have to start thinking in a different way of what is of value for them. What is really important? What can we change? Where can we do things, and where can we not do things? And actually in the process, we also learn a lot about the values of our own society. Because suddenly it seems everything is about money. And is everything about money, or is it about people? So we might have to reconsider and learn a lot about indigenous people to see what's really essential of being person. Well, I'm not going into this philosophy thing, not that religious, but it indicates a little bit doing things with indigenous people goes much further than just making a technical app or something. It's really having to understand what you can do, what you should be doing, how to listen to the people, and what to do together. So it's a different way of working, and it's a different way of doing things that are really meaningful. And so I'm telling this story as well in communities in Africa, because I think in some way what you have to be careful of is if you use the current technology, AI technology especially, you kind of import a culture and a background without noticing it that actually might not fit at all with the culture that you have. And I always say, if you ask ChatGPT anything, you get the answer of a 40-year-old male American. And that might not be very appropriate. So having this context in mind also shows we really have to be careful about how we do the thing, what we do what do we optimize? What kind of things do we actually find important? So the question here was, how can AI support reindeer herders? So it's affected by climate change, it's affected by the mining, it's affected also by forestry. So there are a huge amount of forests in Scandinavia, and most of that is cultivated, so it's very little wild forest. It's affected by green industry, so people drawing water for those factories, but also having infrastructure, railways going to the factories and all that. Modernized tools, snowmobiles, drones, mobiles. So they also have snowmobiles, you can see it here in the picture. So it's not like, oh, we are traditional, we cannot change anything. No, they're saying, well, we don't feed the reindeer, but we can use snowmobiles because snowmobiles is changing our life. That's okay, as long as we don't affect the life of the reindeer. But then there are consequences of using snowmobiles instead of the dog sleds. Why? Because the dog sleds, they had dogs, they could feed the dogs, they could breed the dogs, so dogs are available locally. You can actually create a sled, you can make it and do that locally. A snowmobile, they don't have a snowmobile factory there in the north of Scandinavia. So you have to buy it. So suddenly it's about having money to buy a snowmobile. And that creates a certain kind of dependency of having enough money to invest in a snowmobile. Well, you didn't need to have money, you needed just to have time to create a dog sled. So the economy starts to change as well. One of the consequences of having snowmobiles is that people have bigger reindeer herds. So they need more reindeer to be viable to have a snowmobile for a reindeer herd. So there are a lot of this kind of connections between current developments and reindeer herding. So grazing, don't know if it's very clear. So what you see that there is mining going on here. There are some wind farms coming up here. There is those green things are forestry things. And those kind of developments all interfere in the roots of the reindeer. So this is a part of Sweden, part of northern Sweden, and the reindeer, they go like from this place to that place. So here's mountains, and there's a bit of sea. And you see that the new entities, they're all in the middle of those roots of the reindeer. And there's still alternatives, but the alternatives gets less and less. So in the left you see the blue and the green roots, they're getting closer. And there's less space there available. So what do they do when they meet, when those herds, they mingle? They want to use the same pasture, there's not enough food then. So the grazing gets really difficult, plus you get new types of problems. So when there's enough space and you can move around, you can avoid having herds that actually get together. But when that's no longer possible, how do you cooperate? Because there was not a kind of traditional way of cooperating in this thing. It was like, okay, I'm going there, I want to go there as well, so then you solve something and then you go to an alternative route. And you would both have some alternatives that you can use and avoid any problems. And now both say, no, I can't go anywhere else, I need to go there, so what? How do you solve a problem you never had before? Um, so the idea is that the AI can support render herders to find the best place and route to graze. So the idea is that if there is less possibilities, less space to maneuver in, and possible conflicts, let's see if AI is good in optimizing things and learning about past behavior and all that. So we have a lot of data about the routes that were taken traditionally and what has happened in the last years. So now we have a reindeer herd. You see it here in the middle. They're here, they're on their way to summer pasture along the sea. That's the best place. So of all the places that it could go, and it's assuming that it's going kind of to the right for you, to the east, we found out that that's the optimal. Let's go there. So what data do you need to actually know that that is optimal? So I was just posing, yeah, we find optimal. AI can do that. And everyone thinks, oh, yeah, very good. So what do you need for data? What is optimal?
It depends what you want, right? If you don't want to disturb the human construction, then you have to avoid them. There will be obstacles.
Yeah. So you need to know where the obstacles are. Yeah. What else? Sorry? Snowfall? Where is the snow? Is it possible to find food? Anything else? Sorry?
Where are the mines?
Where are the mines? Oh, where are obstacles? More things. Hmm? Climate data. So what is the weather? I will mention a few more. Where are the other herds? Are they going there? Or are they maybe already there? So how many reindeer are there in the neighborhood? Actually, if you start thinking about it, you come with more and more and more data that actually you might want to know. And do you have all that data? Some of that you have. Climate data you have, you know where the mines are. So actually, one of the things that I kind of hid here, so there's an arrow going from one place to another. But the reindeer, they're not flying there. They're not going in a straight line. So you need to know where they can traverse. And if this is a long patch, so actually, so the length of the arrow, that's probably like 100 kilometers. So the whole of Sweden is like, I think, 3,000 or 3,500 kilometers long. So this is huge distances. So not just what's the optimal place to go to, is there food along the way? How often did it rain between first snowfall and now in that spot? So can they actually feed there? And actually, this has to be re-specified. So I'm learning a lot about reindeer herding while doing this kind of work. So there are places where there's snow with a bit of ice, where it's just good enough for a small herd to still get through the snow. So they do that together, and they get to the food. Some other place when there's more rainfall in between, a large herd can still do it because there is many animals, so they trample around and they take away a lot of snow and get through the ice. Or you have one or a few very big animals that are able to do it by themselves. So this is not like a deterministic one-off thing. This depends on your reindeer herd. How many animals do you have? How big are they? How healthy are they? How often did it rain? How heavy was the rain? How thick is the ice there? Do you know all that? Well, probably some of it, but not all of it. Have other herds been there already? That can also be. So there could be food, but actually the food now is gone. Are there other herds going in the same direction? Because if my AI tells me that that's optimal, any other herd that is not too far off might go to the same spot because that seems to be the optimal spot. So why not? We didn't think about whether this is on your traditional routes, that you are the one going always between those places. Even though you don't own the land, you always use it in a certain way. So we did it last year and the last 100 years, and those other ones, yeah, they came there 2 or 3 times when the situation was very bad, and we allowed them to be there as well. And now they're there close, and they want to go to the same spot. Should we go and tell them to go away, or how do you do that? Was there good growth of lichen this year in that spot? So how is the food condition? So I can see maybe if there's snow, but if I want to know how much food there is, I don't need just the data from now or from a week ago, but I actually need data from the whole year. And the lichen, that's a kind of a moss type of plant, is pretty sensitive. So then I need to know how much and how good is it this year in that spot. So I get quite some different types of data, and I get more and more difficult to gather data. So this, actually I need sensors, or I need people that go around the country to find it in all spots, because I don't know on forehand what's the spots I need. So do I need this for, or do I have this kind of data for the whole country? Probably not. So I have to sample places and then hope for the best. And one other bit here. So I know that when there's forestry, they cut the trees. Then actually the lichen that were there in plentiful, in the next 10 years, they're much less. Not just 1 year, 10 years long, there's less of these plants available. So, but it's sometimes they grow quicker depending on some very particular conditions. So it's not that I know on average it's good there and I know it's good there. No, it might change year by year. Are there other animals, bears, wolves? This is very local. This is also not something you know from year to year. Those bears and wolves, they're quite some bears around, beginning to get more and more wolves as well. They're moving around in large areas, so they're not sticking to one bit of country, they're going around. Also depending again on all kinds of other conditions, climate, weather, all that, but there are no herders for those deer. Those animals, they go wherever they can go. So you have to track and see where they are. So how can the herd go there? I already mentioned it. They don't fly, they have to go. And they have to eat along the route. So can they eat? Are the conditions such that they actually get there? One of the things that we saw this twice now. We live in Sweden for 7 years, so this certainly doesn't happen every year. But at this moment in Umeå, it's I think -11, -12. So the river that flows through town gets frozen. When it's frozen enough, actually the reindeer herds, they can pass the river, they can go across the river, and then the whole herd goes through town. Because they cross through the river, they don't have to go through the streets, they just are on the river, and it's easy for them to pass. They can only do that when there is enough ice, and the ice is thick enough. So that's not always. So, but that actually also determines whether they can go to a certain spot in an easy way. So, can I get there is not like we know the route and there is a road there and is the road ice-free. No, it's much more. It's a lot of possibilities which are not always available, and sometimes conditions are hard and sometimes they're easy. Sometimes there is more food, sometimes there's less food along the route. So you need to take all that into account. So the bears and the wolves, also a wolf will not attack a reindeer because it's too big, but the wolf actually makes the reindeer more nervous. So if you have an alternative, you will not go with your herd close to where there are wolves spotted. Basically because when the reindeer are nervous, they feed less because they're not quiet enough to feed, especially if there's snow, and therefore they have less good health, and that might affect them later in the year. What does the lead reindeer want? So they have 1 or 2 reindeer that they call the lead, so they're the leaders, the boss of the herds. They're usually the older animals, so they often have a lot more experience than the rest, and they seem to know more about where things are good. So they sense more, they have more experience on where to go. So very often the reindeer herders, they follow the lead reindeer and see whether that is feasible, what they want, and try to lead them in the right way, and then the rest will go. So it's not, a reindeer herd is not a blob of reindeer. They're individuals that have their own skills and that need to be taken into account. And that can be used to make things easier or more difficult. Finally, where can the herd go from the spot after grazing there? So how long can they stay there, and what are opportunities to go somewhere else? So it's not about one thing, so they can probably stay in one place for a couple of days, maybe a week, if the place is big enough, and then they need to go somewhere else. So if that place is in the wrong direction, it might be very good to feed there, but the route to the next place might be too long. So you rather go to a place which has more possibilities. Okay, this is one slide. This is partly part of my knowledge, which I got in 1 year from reindeer herders that do this for generations. So imagine how much more they use to actually guide their reindeer someplace. So how do I know what data to get? Where do they get all this data from? Some of the things I can get with sensors, some of them I get from weather forecasts, from other people. This is not like I go to a database and I get my data and then I go learn and I optimize based on that. There's very different types of data. Some of it is very local, some of them is very temporal, some of them depends on what other people do. I need all of that to make a decision. And the decision of others will depend on my decision as well. So you see, it also depends on other herds, where they go. So you make a collective decision somehow. So what seemed to be very obvious, very straightforward, let AI use data and then determine an optimal place where to go with the herd. That's a very good idea for using AI for the reindeer herding. Suddenly it becomes a lot more fuzzy. So we don't have all the data, and it's not easy to get all the data, or to get the right data, or to update the data all the time. So this, although it seems very typical, is maybe not the easiest to do. And then the next thing is, when do you make a decision? So I presented this whole problem as a decision problem, where to go with the herd. I'm here, and now I have to go to another spot. So after day 1, I determine the spot where I go. After 1 day, suddenly it starts raining along the way or in the spot where I want to go. And actually, it was part of the decision process, but the chance was not very high, but it happens anyway. So bad things happen. Tough luck. So do I reconsider? How often do I reconsider? What is the alternative? Shouldn't I have looked at that before? So this is actually a typical robotics problem as well. Whenever I make a plan, I need to plan for contingencies, and I have to actually react to things that are not as expected. So things are not static in the world. Things change. So I don't make a decision in one spot, one time, and then only when I get to the goal. I make a decision continuously. And a reindeer herder will also look at this and then say, well, I do this today and tomorrow I might reconsider and I might have another alternative. And when they get beyond a certain spot, they say, that alternative is not viable anymore. So I have to be very careful to go either there or there. So it's a continuous decision-making process. It's not a one-off thing. And you don't want an AI system that says, well, this is optimal, then the day after, this is optimal, and then some condition changes, and then it says, oh, no, this was optimal after all. And then I go with my reindeer herds like that, and then we go back there, and then no, we go there again. And so where do I go? So again, something has to be stable, you have to be consistent, but also be flexible in a way that you react to the context. And the context changes. It's never the same. So the question is, when do we make a decision? What decision? What does the decision have for consequences? How long do we stick to a decision? When do we say, no, no longer good, we have to make a different decision? What are we optimizing? So I said, well, that place is the best place for the food. Yeah, but maybe there are other things that might be good as well. So if the route is shorter, they might need less food. So what are we optimizing? So one of the things that comes up every year, and it's around, I think, 1 or 2 months from now, do I slaughter a weak animal, or do I think it will still make it till the end of winter? So if I slaughter an animal now, it's not very bad yet, so I can still get quite some money for it. And if it dies before the end of the year, there's no fat on it, there's nothing, I can't get a lot of money when it dies. But if it survives, it will get better again during summer, and then it serves me better. So sometimes culling the herd is good when you expect that a lot of them will die. And if you think about that, that might be also influencing where you want to go with the herd, because if your herd is smaller, there are different places that will be optimal. So, what are we optimizing? Are we optimizing the food that the herd can get now, or the survival rate of the herd, or the 10-year survival rate of the herd, the healthiness of the herd over a long time, the amount of new animals that we will get in the herd, the amount of money that we can make with the herd? What is it that you want to optimize? And that's not unique. That's not one thing that they all think the same about. Surprisingly enough, those Sami reindeer herders, they're actually people. And they have different ideas about what's important. So they agree on something, they have the same kind of background in their culture, but still, some of them, they go for being the biggest and the most important, and other ones for being the best, most healthy herd, and other ones for being the most comfortable, not being too far away. So we're not always optimizing for the same thing, and it's not obvious that you're optimizing for something. And do we need to optimize? So just going maybe back, when we use deep learning or any type of machine learning, what we actually do is we try to learn to try to find the optimal. So there is some criteria, and the learning, the training is done to find an optimal solution to fit that criteria. So there's always, what we do is an optimal. And we even don't know here if we need to optimize. Sometimes it's better to just do something that's sufficiently good. And actually, there's already quite some research that in a very dynamic environment, it's very, very often better to get something that's sufficient than something that's optimal, because the environment changes so often that something that's optimal today might not be optimal tomorrow. And that's because that optimal changes almost every day. It leads to very difficult behavior. So you rather have something that's sufficiently good and that's stable and it's more easy to interpret, more easy to keep, than something that's optimal but has to be changed all the time. So you see, just going through a number of these things, the things that we think are kind of obvious and always are there when you do AI, they actually are not so obvious in these cases. And it's not like I did a very deep and difficult thing here. I actually just scratched the surface about the difficulty of the problems. But you see that fundamentally a number of assumptions that we are used to make don't really hold here. And that means that the solutions that we come up with might not be very useful for those people. So we have to think first, what is it that's their real problem? And what is it that would serve them best? What is the kind of things that actually would help them? And not what are the kind of things that we think we can do? So if we think how to find the best grazing spot, are we supporting the reindeer herders, or are we just solving our own problem inspired by the reindeer herders? So we get this nice story, we get a kind of context that we can use in the paper, we make a program that actually does something, a system that actually gets an optimal grazing space, but in practice, it doesn't really help them at all. So this is all about responsible AI. This is why actually Virginia and me were here today to talk about these kind of things, which are the kind of seemingly non-technical, but actually they should be at the basis of all the things that you're doing. You first have to think about this, and then actually see what you can do with your techniques. I will just give one example out of Africa, where I know a famous professor from the States. He did try to support the parks, the nature parks in some place in Africa against poaching. So poaching animals there. So they devised an AI program that could predict where the poachers would go. But actually, when you see what they did, they created a model where they could make a system that is very interesting theoretically and actually got them a lot of publications. But in practice, they could not predict at all where the poachers were because that depended on the animals. And they actually didn't really know where the animals were going because that depended on the weather and the feed conditions and all that. So they simplified and abstracted away from the real world to a problem that actually was very interesting to solve academically. But they forgot the real world. So what is the meaning of solving a problem in abstract when it has no implication in reality? So the next question is, according to, I'm saying us, our academics, we're from the big town. We are not from the Sami communities. We are not them. The question is, those people have been doing that for a long time, and they have a lot of knowledge about doing their job, as most people when they do it a lot of times. So the question is, what do they know? So don't they have knowledge? Do they have things that they can use that we can use in our programs? So they have something like, if we wait a week, we can cross Umeå using the frozen river. And they have that based on their experience on how thick the ice is, how hard it freezes, how high the river was when it started freezing over, all that kind of stuff. But for them, that's a kind of experiential knowledge that they use to create another route. So we might not have that extra possibility, but they have that. Trains are stopped near Kiruna, so we can cross the railway. So Kiruna is a mining place in the north of Sweden, and in winter it happens regularly that because of the snow and ice, the trains, they actually don't manage to cross there. So they're stopped, and then they have to clear the rails, and it takes a day before they can go. So they hear that. They also get alerted. They look for those kind of things. They say, well, the trains are stopped. There's free passage there. So normally they always have to take care because the reindeer don't go like cows. They go in one herd, but they spread out over 1 or 2 kilometers. And it can take half an hour or more to cross a railway. And then the train passes and you kill a few reindeers. So this actually says, well, we have another way to go. There is a bear in the area again, so we avoid going that route. So they actually alert each other as well. They are in contact and they can actually communicate. It's amazing. Our AI models never do that. They learn and they train and whatever. But these people, they just communicate. And the one says, I saw a bear there and it's going that direction. Or normally that means it goes in that area because that's his feeding ground and blah, blah, blah. And suddenly they have a map and a model where they say, this is a good route because we avoid the bear. The trees told me to kill the wolf. Oh, wow. I thought trees couldn't talk. So this is stupid, superstitious knowledge. It's not really knowledge. It's, we don't consider that in science because trees don't talk. So they cannot tell me to kill the wolf. And this means that we don't really respect their way of living and knowledge and how they communicate that. Because what it actually means is, I don't really know how to point to a specific cause in nature, but I feel a lot of different things together, and that situation tells me, based on 20, 30, 40 years of experience, that that wolf is bad for the herd. So this kind of what seems superstitious fairy tale things actually is a kind of shorthand for very tangible knowledge, which they cannot express. They don't really have all the data there available, but it's something that actually is true. So they should kill the wolf because it's bad for the herd. And it's a combination of things in nature which they can't actually enumerate all, but they have this experience that it comes to their senses and they get that. So this is also something we very often we try to ignore it because it doesn't fit in our Western picture. But we then forget that actually this is not just trees talking, it's nature telling things in ways that people couldn't place yet. And it's the same like people saying, God spoke to me and this or that. It very often means, I don't know how I got this, but this is something that actually I feel. And very often it's literally feel through the senses, a combination of things that makes a situation dangerous or profitable or something. So what they know is expressed in many different ways. And if you put the last sentence, and I emphasize that because I know this is a real thing. Yeah, I'm trying to avoid the camera, this thing. Oh, just kidding. So this is something, I didn't make the last one I didn't make up. This is something that actually was told to some students. If you put this in an LLM, it's put in the same level as any of the other fairy tales. And it's very difficult to subtract the knowledge. What's the real knowledge here? So what you know is that this situation calls for killing the wolf, and I don't really know what that situation is. So maybe I should try and find out. So either by talking to other people, asking directly, what is it that you got to know? What is it? Is it the trees? Is it really something, has it to do with the forest? Is it a thing on the trees being more or less green in the winter? Is there snow still on the branches, so it's actually very cold? Is there something on the ground in the forest which you noticed but not consciously? So rather than storing this, which doesn't really give you a lot of information if you're not a reindeer herder, you should actually go and look for more or ask people. So this is exactly the kind of things, you can accumulate a lot of this kind of knowledge that's there, but if you just compile it and have an LLM process this, it doesn't give you a lot of useful information if you're not a reindeer herder, because you lack the context, you lack the background, you lack the way of living in which this should be placed. So we have to view this kind of knowledge in a different way. It cannot be compared and put in the same bucket as the rest of the Western knowledge. So they have no data, they don't have sensors that collect a lot of data, they don't collect the data in our sense of doing things. They have no scientific knowledge in the sense that there are general rules that are always applicable and anyone can use them. But they have a lot of need to collect data. So you need to get data that is relevant. So you need to know what data actually needs to be there. We built an AI model based on scientific data. We make a system that improves their life. So there is a difference in we use scientific data, which can be very partial. We collect it because we think that data is the one that is important. So I gave you this whole list of things that you might want to know, but I can guarantee you that it's not even half of what you actually would like to have, let alone having the data available, because a lot of that only comes from censoring it, and censoring it in a very detailed way over a number of years. And I know that actually with the snow and the ice in the snow, they're now having kind of sticks where there are sensors on different heights, so that you can better see how much ice there is in between the layers of snow. So you don't have just one sensor in a place, you have a number of sensors on different levels. So there's other sensors that are on the plants that see how well they are. So all of that, it doesn't come for free, it's not there yet. So you need to collect a lot of things, and that's the kind of things which doesn't match with what's actually there. So we create an artificial world in which we solve a problem that's not a real problem, but we were very happy because we could use our techniques. So I see I have a few minutes left because we started a bit late. So what we have to learn is we don't have to have always sensors, but we have senses. Sense in the sense of human senses. And human senses are also combinations. We feel, we smell, we have the temperature, but also moisture, the wind, all that kind of things. We feel it at the same time and we combine it. So having senses actually is different from having sensors. There is a seasonal life, not calendar-based life. So reindeer herders don't go by dates. They have a calendar that is connected to our calendar, but it's based on the nature, the phases in nature, the phases on the amount of snow and ice and temperatures, and then getting the herds back to one place or another. So that's kind of connected to the Gregorian calendar, but not completely. It's nature and situation based and not book knowledge. So one of the things that happens here is that this nature and situation, when they change, the knowledge also changes. So they have heuristics on what to do, and when a couple of years things don't work like that anymore because of the climate change, they will change their knowledge. So the knowledge changes dynamically over the years. It's very pragmatic and robust, but they're heuristics. They're not laws of nature. They're not the kind of scientific things that we think are true always. So they're not abstract in general, but they're very good heuristics. But you will find that if you go to different communities, they might also have different heuristics, but they might all work perfectly well for their areas, in their specific conditions, because one is in a valley where it's always a little bit warmer, another one is near a lake where it's always more windy and more cold, and they use different heuristics on what to do and what day. So it's actually very robust. So we also have to think about who are they. And now I want to stress, because I was asked about this, these points, they're not just applying for indigenous people. They're actually things we should always ask. Who are they? Who are our customers? Who are the people that use our systems? People with a different culture do not have the same priorities in life as we do very often. So we often assume that people all have the same priorities, but that's not true. So with indigenous people, it's very often more obvious because they're more nature-based, very often. But it makes it more clear that the values and the interests are different, and therefore maybe also the kind of things that they want is different. Our problems are not their problems. So our solutions are also not their solutions. So we first need to understand the people. We need to understand their lives and their context. And we first need to be interested in the people. So here I actually create a circle again. I started off the presentation. We need to go from technique-based to people-based. And this makes it even more clear. We need to know the people. We need to know what is in their interest. If we make systems, if we start developing techniques that are supposed to help those people, if we don't know those people, then we're making things that make absolutely no sense. So responsible AI starts with the people. What are the criteria of success? When is a decision a good decision? Who should be involved? What is considered when a decision is made? What do people know and what would they like to know when making a decision? How can AI assist in that context? So I will tell you one little anecdote, very personal one. I was head of department for a year and a half in Umeå, and I'm not Swedish, I'm Dutch, so we're used to one way of running things. And Sweden and Holland are both Western European, so you think, oh, they're the same. People also look quite similar, so the languages are not that far apart. So how difficult can it be? So I learned the hard way that the way a decision is made in an organization in Sweden is that every person in the organization wants to have a say in the decision. So they want to be heard, and you have to make sure that you show them that you heard them. They don't want to be part of the decision. So being part of the decision is bad, because then you can't blame the management to do the wrong things, of course. In the Netherlands, if you make a decision, people want to have a finger there. They need to be part of the decision. So they will make it clear to you that they didn't see in that decision that their things was heard and therefore part of what you decided. So this is a huge difference in way of managing in Sweden and the Netherlands that seem pretty similar, but it means in Sweden the process that you follow is very important, because it makes clear to everyone, I saw everything, I heard everyone, and there you are. And then the rest, you don't care. In the Netherlands it's different. They don't care about this process. They want to see in the result that I'm there. My idea is part of your decision. So for one, you consider the decision, the process in the decision, it's very important. For the other one, the process is not so important, but the outcome is very important. So you see in countries, both Western European, the type of things you consider in a decision that can be very similar is quite different. So it's not fixed, it's not something that everyone agrees on. So the consequences of doing our projects is that we take a lot of time. You need to gain trust and learn from each other. Your project planning depends on when people are available, rather than some Gantt charts or funding agencies' deadlines. You learn a lot, and when you get to implement an AI system, it will actually have impact. So one of the things that you see in the picture here is, instead of showing the reindeer herders where to go with their reindeer, this is reindeer alerts on the map. So people that are in cars can see where they can expect reindeers on the road, which actually is very practical because it avoids a lot of reindeer being killed by cars. So it's not what we thought about, this very fancy, nice, we know where you have to go, but actually this gives them a lot more benefit. But it's not so much AI, of course, it's just using GPS trackers on reindeer and then showing it on a map. But hey, if you want the impact, AI is not the primary thing, it's about the result that you are after. So responsible AI has to start with people. I think this is the third time, so now it should stick. Responsible AI has to start with the people, not with training, not with LLMs, not with machine learning. It has to start with the people. Real life impact is more important than writing good papers. Of course, for your career, having good papers also is very important. But if you have a lot of impact in real life, that's probably more satisfying in the long run. And I can know because I have a long life already. So having good papers comes when you have projects that have real impact, because it's much easier to write a good paper about something that actually worked, that actually benefited people, because it actually gives people an idea that this thing that you did was really useful. Doing responsible AI with indigenous people leads to new AI methodologies and techniques. So one of the things I'm now doing on my research is how do we represent this traditional knowledge? How do we represent things like the trees told me to kill the wolf? How do I extract from that the essence such that we can pass it on to new generations? It takes time, you learn a lot, and it's very rewarding when you do it properly. I don't know about the letter yet, but for me it's already rewarding, but I don't know if I did it properly. Okay, I think it's time for tea.
Thank you very much. Okay, maybe we can take the question during the tea time.
Yeah.
It's okay?
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you, Professor, for that thought-provoking session on indigenous AI. Now we'll have a short break from 3:30 to 4 p.m.